Okay. Good evening, everybody. We're going to get started. I just dropped a message in the chat to make sure the attendees are able to see and hear us, because I think we hit start, but I was looking at other things on the screen. So tonight we are here to discuss some proposed green infrastructure retrofits at Smith's Beach here in Braintree. I'm Hillary Waite. I'm the stormwater manager for the town of Braintree. I am joined by Wednesday Walton, our stormwater outreach coordinator. I'm also joined by a couple of the engineers who are working with us on this project from Niche Engineering, and they are Jennifer Johnson and Jess Walla. Thank you both for being here. And we're also joined with some other Public Works staff members, Chris Griffin and John Thompson and Ben Hook as well. Thank you all for being here this evening. So a quick couple of housekeeping points before we move forward. I first want to say from the outset, this meeting is being recorded. That's so we can share it in the future. If you have any parts, if you end up participating and wish those parts not to be broadcast, we just want to let you know those will be recorded and we'll be posting the meeting to YouTube later. Additionally, we have added a site visit to talk about the retrofits, and the details of that are on, I think, our first slide. But we're doing a little site visit, informal, on Saturday, this Saturday, February 5th at 10 a.m. So if you'd like to get an on-the-ground reference for what we're proposing here and what the design might look like there at the site, you can meet us there. We're going to be in the Vinedale parking lot. We'll talk about the project. We will be outside the entire time. So if you do join us, make sure you dress for the weather. And with that, I'm going to give it over to Wednesday, who will talk a little bit about how the Zoom meeting will work. She'll talk about green infrastructure, and we'll go from there. Thank you.
All righty, thanks, Hillary. So like Hillary said, we do have that site visit coming up on February 5th if you want to see what this project is going to look like. Real quick, just to go over the agenda, we will be going over just the basic Zoom rules, a little bit of a recap on what the stormwater division is, as well as what green infrastructure is. Then we'll be going over our Smith Beach draft designs for this project, and then we will open it up to public comments and questions. And again, just a reminder, this meeting is being recorded, so if you don't want any of your questions or comments to be made public, feel free to send us an email afterwards and we will gladly answer those for you. Please try to remain muted during the presentation. If you are on the phone, just make sure to dial *6 to mute yourself. To ask a question or leave a comment, just go ahead and hit the chat box at the bottom middle of your screen. And if you're on the phone, you can dial *9 to raise your hand. Please, when you're asking questions, try not to repeat questions that have already been asked. Questions will be read after the presentation is complete, and we will be prioritizing people who have not had the opportunity to comment or ask questions. So if you are going to be asking them, just make sure to try to give other people an opportunity to ask as well. So with that being said, what is the Town of Braintree Stormwater Division? We protect the town of Braintree from harmful flooding and pollution through proactive maintenance, public education, and infrastructure modernization. We came to be in 2018, and our official outreach mechanism is Clean Water Braintree. So we are on social media at Clean Braintree on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We use our social media to give just general stormwater information and educational pieces, as well as updates on projects, grants in the area, that kind of stuff. And then we also are on SeeClick Fix. So if you have any stormwater related issues that you would like to report, whether that is a clogged drain or you're noticing some flooding, feel free to report any of that on there. We do all get an update immediately when those are put through. So the reason why we created the Stormwater Division in the first place is because Braintree water bodies fail state quality standards. Non-point source pollution is the primary cause of these failures. Essentially, what non-point source pollution is when rain, snow, sleet, any form of precipitation falls, that is stormwater. It hits surfaces like mountains, streets, developments, croplands, farms, etc., hits the ground, picks up pollutants, and carries it into water bodies. And that's what causes a lot of the pollution and a lot of those failures with the state. Stormwater infrastructure is what takes that water into the water body. So as you can see here, probably one of our best examples and our most visual examples that you can go take a look at yourself is at Sunset Lake. We have a variety of storm drains around the parking lot there. And those storm drains connect directly to that outfall that you can see. So anytime there's trash, debris, leaves, salt, any form of pollutants, they go directly into that drain and then pour out into Sunset Lake, as you can see there. So what is green stormwater infrastructure? Basically, GSIs, or green stormwater infrastructure, use natural and low impact technology to capture and treat stormwater on site. So a good example of this is, again, at Sunset Lake, we have a rain garden that captures the rain that comes in. The water soaks down and goes through a filtration system and then puts the treated water back out. You can also build these at home, but these are probably some of the most common ones that you see. And these are also what we like to use to try to fix any pollution that we have in the town. These structures typically help with flooding, polluted runoff, water quantity, but also they help just boost the aesthetic of the area. They provide educational opportunities, increase home values, increase shade in the area, soil health, as well as wildlife habitat. So that brings us to the project that we are currently working on at Smith Beach. And this is where I will hand it off to Hillary.
Thank you again, Wednesday. So yes, we've heard about green infrastructure. We've heard about its benefits. So how do we make it happen? So what I have here is a project timeline, essentially, and it has milestones rather than a given period of months or years or what have you. So we start with identifying a site. We study it a little more to make sure it makes sense for green infrastructure. We eventually come to a point of conceptual design. We review that design, we refine it. We come to eventually final design. At that point is when we start to get permits from state, local, maybe even federal authorities, depending on the size of the project. Then we get our funding together, then we build. This can take anywhere from a few months to a few years. And so we start with, in this case, identifying a site. So we have been granted in the past funding from US EPA and from Mass DEP to identify sites in Braintree that might be suitable for stormwater infrastructure. And through that study, we identified these 7 sites. And now we're going to drill down on Smith's Beach. So when we look for what makes a site a good candidate for green infrastructure, we think about, is it close to a water body? Where is it positioned in the watershed? Does it make sense to maybe prepare this area for future repairs since we're going to be there doing work anyway? We think about considerations like that as we look for sites that might be good green infrastructure candidates. And we can go to the next slide, thank you. And in this case, here's what we see at Smith's Beach. We're very close to the water body. So we know that if we're treating stormwater there, it's going to enter the water body at the cleanest that it can be after we treat the quality. Right now, we're not treating the quality, we're just moving water that way. And you can see there's an outfall there. It's not in the best of shape. You're seeing a little bit of erosion in that photo because the water is coming at such a speed and volume that it's causing that scour. And you can see from the street at Edge Hill Road that the stormwater, that's the drain where eventually it leads out to those outfalls. And that's the parking lot. Thank you, Wednesday. And you can see the parking lot doesn't drain very well. It's pretty wet, even though this isn't a wet day. And there's just puddles everywhere. The parking lot's a bit patchy. So we're thinking maybe if we come back to this parking lot, maybe the next time we come back to this parking lot and do work on it, maybe we can make it a little bit better. So that's how we ended up picking Smith's Beach as a potential site. So from there, we had to study it a little bit further. And some of the things that we do, we confirm the existing drainage in the area so that we know exactly what we have there, what we could use in future designs because it's already there. And we also, at this site, performed some soil tests to make sure that water could actually infiltrate. Does that soil drain well? Is the groundwater level low enough that you could actually infiltrate into groundwater, or would it just be rising up into the project itself? So we know from the study that we've already done here that the groundwater table is suitable, the soil is suitable, we can do infiltration here. And the next slide shows that upstream watershed for this project. So it takes some of that upland neighborhood, the stormwater that's coming through there and out those outfalls that we showed you, instead would kind of stop at this project instead. And that existing drainage that we already have will stay in place and we'll reuse it as overflow structures. So we know the site is good and we know the site will work. So we go here to conceptual design. We basically put together a general idea of what the project will look like, what engineering strategies we're going to use, its approximate size and shape, and the goals for the project. And that conceptual design looks like this. And what we have here is the Vinedale Road parking lot. We propose a porous pavement, or also called a permeable pavement, which is a special type of asphalt that essentially lets water run through it instead of off of it. And in the beach itself, a smaller infiltration trench to help us take some of that drainage and infiltrate it down through soils and groundwater instead of out through that outfall, creating all that erosion and scour in the river. And can we go back for 1 second? I also want to talk about the landscaping there. We also have observed this parking lot. It's a blacktop. There's not a lot covering it. And we took this as an opportunity to say we could add some landscaping here. We could reduce some of that heat island creation. And so that's why even in our conceptual design, we show trees and landscaped islands. They're pretty, they're shapes and you can see the trees, but now as we go forward with the design we're about to show you, you'll see there's some pretty significant and good looking landscaping planned there. And we're almost there. So now the stage we're in is design review. And so we're drawing closer to this final design. We're drawing closer to the permitting process, but this is a good time for us to come out and specifically ask for feedback on the details. And to go over those details, we have our engineers here from Niche, which is excellent. And I am going to give them their full introductions as they're due. And before I do, I just want to note the next few slides have a QR code on them. If you scan that code, they will take you to the designs on the town website. So if you want to sit with them on your own, look at them on your own, you can scan that code, get your phone really close to your screen, and that'll link you straight to those designs. They're also on the town website, and Wednesday we'll talk about a link later. But at this point, I'm going to introduce Jen and Jess from Niche. So Jen has 17 years of experience in the field of civil and water resources engineering. She's provided stormwater and watershed planning and design for institutional, municipal, and commercial projects. She specializes in tailoring sustainable stormwater management techniques to site-specific conditions, including roadways, private and public developments, and public open space. This includes the design of green infrastructure practices, including bioretention, stormwater wetlands, and porous pavement to meet the challenges of climate change. She has successfully designed these systems at the site, neighborhood, and watershed scale to increase resilience and meet local and state stormwater and water quality regulations. And Jess Walla, who has been working in the civil engineering and green infrastructure design and planning field for 9 years. During this time, she has demonstrated a true commitment to site sustainability, as demonstrated by her certifications as a LEED APND and as an ISI ENV SP. Jess supports engineering and planning teams in designing site improvements and understanding site conditions, performs construction inspection of green infrastructure, and works closely with public utility agencies like us to evaluate and design green infrastructure within the public realm. Thank you both for being here, and I'll let you go over the details because this is absolutely your wheelhouse.
Excellent. Thank you, Hillary. Jen and I are really excited to work on this project in the community. And one of those reasons is because this really is a great site. There's a lot of opportunities here to really use the site conditions that Hillary had explained. We have really good soils in this area. It's situated in a really ideal location for the watershed. And it's just going to end up being a really optimal system for treating the watershed. So as you recall, in a few previous images that you don't have to go back to, but this parking lot sits at the intersection of a few streets downhill. So what happens is the runoff from these residential parcels and the roadway gets collected. And this parking lot is situated in a way where we're actually able to, with some pretty minimal interventions, collect that runoff and treat it through these green infrastructure systems. So what we're showing on this plan is, as Hillary described, a permeable pavement surface. So what this means is any rainfall that actually hits the parking lot itself, it's going to be infiltrated through that porous surface. It'll look a little bit different than regular pavement, but functionally operates just like your typical paved parking lot. So water will permeate through there. It goes through a couple layers, which you can see on that detail that we have on the top left. It'll go through a few layers where it gets treated. We have a filter course there. It'll filter out any fine particles. And then it will be stored in the reservoir course. So Hillary had mentioned that this is a great site in terms of groundwater and the soil conditions. We have really sandy soil here, and we did a test pit actually out at the site, and groundwater wasn't encountered, which is great for us because that means water is going to flow through the bottom of that section really quick, and we're not worried about groundwater coming in and ending up, we don't want to be conveying groundwater out to the beach through the system. So that's the plan for water that hits the parking lot. And then, as I mentioned, we're kind of at the bottom of a hill. So there's going to be catch basins along Vinedale that are there today. We're going to pick up the runoff that makes its way to those catch basins and direct it to a system that's below that darker section of the parking lot. There we'll have these plastic chambers that essentially they'll be surrounded by this filter fabric. And essentially what that does is really treat the water. It gets rid of sediment. And then after the water makes its way through that treatment system, it will similarly infiltrate into the ground. And the runoff that makes its way down Vinedale from Arborway will also be collected. We're going to add new curbing along Vinedale, and that will have some curb breaks and allow water to just passively make its way into that green strip that you see along Vinedale. And then we'll have a backup catch basin as well to collect any water. And we'll similarly send that to that same treatment structure that I had described. And that will treat that water coming from the residents and the roadways and allow it to infiltrate. I think that describes a lot that's on this plan. Like Hillary said, we'll be able to take any questions. You can also see some of the aesthetic improvements that we're showing. So the green buffer really does serve a few purposes. One, it will be helpful in collecting water. If any of these surfaces become clogged, it can act as a backup to collect water and continue to send it into that subsurface infiltration system. It'll allow us to really collect that water off of Vinedale through those curb breaks that we described. And it will provide shade trees. It'll be, aesthetically pleasing compared to the current conditions out there. So that's really makes up majority of the system components. And lastly, you'll see that the curb alignment at the entrance is slightly modified. I think this is in line with a lot of the work that Public Works has been doing to kind of provide some traffic calming, make the road safer, and add some green space in there as well. Great, so this plan kind of describes what's going on below grade. So that previous image was really what it looks like at the surface. And this describes kind of the infrastructure that allows us to really collect water from Vinedale, from Beechwood Road, direct it to that infiltration system that we show in blue, kind of on the westernmost portion of the parking lot. So water will really all get collected there, treated from the outside sources, and then anything hitting the parking lot will make its way directly through the surface. And we also have some backup systems like I described in case water's flowing too fast or anything becomes clogged. They will act as a backup and continue to get water below grade so that it's not directly running off to that outfall. And so as a result of this system, what we're really looking at is, and this is a much smaller system, but this is located at the outfall. What we're looking at here is picking up runoff from Edge Hill. Similarly, this has a pretty sizable watershed draining to it as well. So we'll be treating a pretty big area with this. We send it to a water quality structure, which is really a prefabricated unit that treats runoff for sediment, And then we'll be sending it to that infiltration system where we're really getting majority of that water treatment. Great, and this is just a cross section of what these systems look like below grade. The goal of this project really, there's multiple goals. Water quality treatment is one major goal in these systems because we really have that capacity to just direct that water into the ground. That's really one of the best treatment options. We're treating it for sediment, but also this removes phosphorus from the water that's flowing out of these systems into the beach. It removes bacteria and other pollutants that are concerned. So these really, by infiltrating, you're getting rid of that dirty water and ensuring that what comes out from those outfall pipes is much cleaner than what's coming out in the current day.
Thank you so much, Jess. As you can see, one more time, we're plugging our site visit for Saturday. If you want to see what this site looks like in person, again, you can meet us on Saturday. That's this Saturday at 10 a.m. We'll be at the Vinedale Road parking lot. That's independent of any precipitation apart from a snow emergency. If the mayor declares a snow emergency, we will not meet. Otherwise, we will be there. I don't expect there to be a snow emergency. I want to be clear. We're not expecting that kind of storm, we hope. But thank you again for your availability tonight and for walking us through that, because I think you have done such a great job making this not only an excellent project, but an excellent project specific to Braintree and specific to this location. And we're excited about how well it fits into where it belongs. And so that brings us back to our project timeline. So this is where we are. We're in design review. We're hoping for feedback. We want to make sure that when we go forward, we have all of the information that we might need from the public. And I want to talk about where we're going. So we're in design review. Tomorrow, we're going to discuss this project informally with the Conservation Commission, and we're going to get some preliminary feedback from the commissioners. Between that meeting, which is tomorrow, and their next meeting in March, we're going to be hearing feedback, incorporating feedback, and working on these designs, refining them a little bit more. And then we'll submit to the Conservation Commission in March for an actual permit under the Wetlands Act. So we'll submit our notice of intent for CONCOM in March. So there's still time, even if you don't think of something right now, there's still time to talk to us. So if you want to sit with the designs, look them over, see what you think, there's still time to do that, and then contact us. So you're not too late if tonight you don't have something to say. So keep the lines of communication open. We'll have lots of information at the end about how you can contact us. After we get to final design, we are going to be what we call shovel ready. We have the design ready to go for construction. We have permits ready to go for construction. The point that we're at is figuring out, the point that we'll be at then is figuring out funding. So this project's estimated cost is about $770,000. And that's a bit of a heavy lift that has to do with the cost of permeable pavement mostly. So we'll be looking at how we can leverage federal, state, and local grants to help with that, and how we can perhaps incorporate it into planned town spending. Because, eventually we're going to repave this area. Eventually we're going to be over here anyway. And then we'll have this design in our pocket when we get there. And I know it sounds a little odd to get all the way to this point, to get all the way to final design and then not necessarily build right away. But we keep these designs in our pocket. We keep them ready to go. And an example of this happening recently is we had a conceptual design at the Council on Aging. The Council on Aging they had additional paving done this year for their parking lot. And we're going to be able to construct more stormwater retrofits over there through a grant because we had that conceptual design ready to go. So it's really good to have these handy when the granting agencies go, hey, there's a funding available. And we go, we have a great idea. Check this idea out. And I hope you all also think it's a great idea because we're very proud of it. But we can move to the next slide because it's almost your turn to talk. The one thing I want to go over before I open the floor is some FAQs. What will this project cost? Again, it's going to be about $770,000. It's fairly expensive on the order of stormwater retrofits that I've seen. And I've seen them mostly on the local level. I haven't seen really huge ones. This is definitely a smaller scale. This isn't a whole park. It's just one small parking lot and the surrounding beach area. Some folks ask who will maintain the structures if they're built. That's going to be the stormwater division. We consider this equipment, this material to be part of our system the same way we do catch basins, manholes, and pipes in the street. So it's the stormwater division's responsibility, and we will maintain it because it doesn't work for treating bacteria and sediment if it's not well maintained. And lastly, because I get this question a lot, no matter where the project is, no matter what the project is, and people ask me, will the project cause flooding in their neighborhood? And the short answer is no, but I will elaborate. Basically, when we design these, we are designing them to treat as much or more stormwater than the current system moves and treats. So we're not increasing the amount of water anywhere. We're just moving it and conveying it and eventually getting rid of it in a different way. So if you have flooding that particularly seems atypical, or it seems like there's a catch basin that might be clogged, you should always contact the stormwater division and let us know. But we're confident that this project isn't going to cause additional flooding problems. And with that, I really appreciate everybody taking the time to listen so far. And if you have any questions or comments, now is definitely the time. So please go ahead and drop them in the chat. You can also raise your hand and use *9 if you're on the phone to raise your hand. And Wednesday we'll read the questions and we'll go from there.
Awesome, thanks, Hillary. So like she said, please ask your questions in the chat, *9 to raise your hand. Try not to repeat any questions that have already previously been asked. And we will be prioritizing those who haven't asked questions before we do any repeats back to people who already have. And this is a recorded meeting, so if you do not want your questions or comments to be made publicized, be sure to send us a message privately after the meeting is over and we will get back to you. So with that being said, it looks like we have our first question. This is from Phoebe. Would it be worthwhile to do this plan without the permeable paving if it is the price limiting factor? I've heard that it's better to do what you can, redirecting to a permeable surface, i.e. the landscaping, rather than wait for the money to do the top of the line solution.
Thank you for that question. The answer is it might be, and we might have other ways to choose to treat the stormwater. You saw in that permeable pavement scenario that there's also a subsurface structure planned for under the parking lot, and that could be something we consider sizing differently or expanding. But we think that the permeable pavement is the best way to mimic natural processes as best as we can. So if pavement becomes more permeable pavement becomes more affordable, that's something we might be able to fast track. And if it becomes less affordable, it's a reconsideration that we'll have to make. So I know that wasn't really a complete answer, but the answer is essentially maybe. It's something we could definitely think about and consider, especially if we end up in the area doing other work before we're able to raise that kind of funding.
Alrighty, our next question is from Lucy. How long will the construction phase take and how disruptive will it be?
That is a good question as well. I would defer to Jess on this one. Jess, do you mind taking this one? It really depends on the project.
Yeah, that's a good question. Sorry, I'm going to defer to Jen too. I'm actually, it depends on the contractor definitely and the conditions, but Jen, what's your experience?
I think since it's a pretty contained site with the parking lot, and we're not proposing major changes or disruption to the lot itself. They'll be grinding the pavement and doing some excavation and then replacing the pavement. So I don't think it'll take too much time, Hillary. And we could also break out the phasing a little bit separate for that smaller subsurface infiltration system so that it could be phased to limit the disruption, especially in the public roads. So I think with respect to the parking lot itself, we're looking at a few weeks to a month or so. I think depending on how the contractor decides to phase the work. So I'll leave it with that.
Thank you both. And yes, if it were to be constructed, that would be something we would be in continual communication about. We would be letting you know, hey, notices are coming, construction is coming, especially if there was going to be anything that was generating a noise, we'd be in very frequent communication.
Alrighty, our next question is from Patricia. She says, I believe Braintree was just awarded $55,000. Will that be applied to this project?
I am very excited about that question, even though the answer is no. So that $55,000 we were awarded is to also design retrofits at Watson Park. So just down the street, we're proposing to design some stormwater retrofits over there as well. And they would be part of kind of this area's suite of improvements. So that $55,000 will bring us to where we are with this design. So we're almost at final design, and that funding will bring us to final design for another project. So it'll have another project in our pocket. For this project, we were awarded $45,000 by the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. So this is part of our municipal vulnerability preparedness program through that state program.
And just to also follow up on that, there are tons of grants that are going out that we're able to apply for, but unfortunately, we don't get to choose where that money goes to. So depending on the grant and depending on the agency, that's kind of how we decide which project it will be applicable to. So that specific grant was not applicable for this project. But we are definitely constantly researching and keeping our eyes out for grants that can go towards as many of our projects as possible. And we are definitely excited that we received that one. It's just that it wasn't for specifically Smith Beach. So that was a great question. Our next question is, where did that go? Sorry, bear with me. I love that you guys are asking so many questions. I'm just losing my place a little bit. Our next question is from Anne. How did you prioritize the various projects shown on the slide of projects around Braintree? Wondering if any projects planned for Sunset Lake, and if so, when?
So we actually have green infrastructure at Sunset Lake. So that was one of the first green infrastructure retrofits that went in Braintree. And I'm sorry that I can't tell you what year exactly it was in, but that was funded by Mass DEP and EPA as well. And I will take this moment to shout out Kelly Phelan, who is the town's conservation planner. She spearheaded that project at the time. And in many grant applications processes that we've been through, we've had positive feedback from the granting agency. We saw what you did at Sunset Lake. We really liked that. Please pardon my cat. And so that Sunset Lake retrofit is already there. There's some permeable pavers there. It's a little different from permeable pavement, but there's some permeable pavers there. There are some small bioretention basins, or also known as rain gardens, at Sunset Lake, and those help capture and treat stormwater runoff before it enters Sunset Lake as well. One thing I will say is a lot of grant programs target rivers over lakes and ponds, and that just has to do with the way our interconnected watersheds work. Sometimes lakes and ponds don't feed into the greater river system, and so they're seen as less connected to other water bodies in a way that makes them less attractive grant projects.
Matt is asking, what is the useful life of the permeable pavement?
I will let the engineers go ahead on that one, but I will say it's extended when you maintain it correctly.
Yeah, I would say the exact year sort of depends on the typical maintenance that Braintree would be doing, but I would say that in this parking lot, the benefit is that this is an ideal situation for for permeable pavement. We're not looking at heavy truck use or high speed areas. So that's when permeable pavement really is a good application. So really you'd be looking at the same useful life as a typical pavement, which is often 15, 20 years, however often Public Works is repaving.
Awesome.
I'll just add to that sometimes even porous pavement that's well maintained can add to the life of the pavement because you're not having the same freezing and thawing at the surface. So there's some benefits to the permeable nature of the pavement as well.
Perfect. Our next question is from Robert. He says, very exciting project. How much flood storage for stormwater is in the infiltration basins? Seems like a co-benefit that would make it even more competitive for funding. This project will fix the broken manhole on the beach.
Yes, regarding the manhole, we're actually working on getting that fixed sooner than that. We think that manhole in particular is a very high priority for us. The discharge from it is very, very concerning in terms of the erosion, and separately just really unattractive. So we're working on that at an expedited timeline. But the flood storage, again, I'll give it over to our engineers.
Great. Yeah, focusing specifically on the parking lot system, which is entirely permeable as it's currently designed. And like we said, diverting all that runoff coming down the roadways, it actually can store a lot because you have such good soils there. So I guess I'll maybe state it in terms of storm. If we've all heard of 100-year storms, I'm sure we've heard of it a lot recently, but our permeable pavement, it can basically store all the runoff coming from those residential parcels in the streets up to the 2-year storm, which is actually a very sizable storm event. And a lot of green infrastructure systems wouldn't be able to handle that capacity, but because of the site conditions we are, so that's about equivalent to a storm event of about 4 inches. If you just think about a rain gauge, maybe even more than 4 inches. So it's performing pretty well. Like you said, there's a lot of storage capacity here.
Alrighty, so our next question is from David. Will the outfall pipe at the beach be relocated higher on the beach, and will it be planted with native plants?
So I believe we're planning to keep what we have there in place in terms of the outfall pipe itself. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jess. As for planting with native plants, not on that section of the beach, but there is a separate restoration project that's ongoing just a little bit farther down, kind of as you, forgive me just drawing this in the air, but as you turn down Gordon Road, there's an area of salt marsh over there that is undergoing a restoration project. We're bidding that project now, and that area will be being planted with some native plants. We're doing that is another project spearheaded by Kelly Phelan, so shout out to her again if you have questions about that.
Our next question is from Nick. The plan showed a water treatment structure at the beach. Will that be visible, or is that buried in the sand?
That is a subsurface structure.
There's already an astronomical tidal flooding in that area. Has additional sea level rise been taken into account?
Absolutely. This is, again, it's a municipal vulnerability preparedness project. So that was one of the requirements of this grant, that we consider sea level rise and that we consider the way more frequent and more intense precipitation is going to impact the town as well as this project specifically. Jess, do you want to talk about any of the specifics there?
I would just add that while, tidal flooding coming in, we're not going to make a substantial, that's kind of an infinite amount of volume coming in. So we're not going to make any substantial volume reduction in that. This is a good site. This is, there's no critical infrastructure here. We'll be improving the site so it absorbs water faster. So overall, it would be an improvement during those high tide conditions.
And then our next question is from Michael. Does porous asphalt require any special maintenance so that it does not clog with sand, etc.? Were grid pavers considered?
So maintenance-wise, yes. Essentially, the way, this sounds odd, but the way that you maintain porous asphalt is vacuuming it. The same way you vacuum a rug, well, with a big vacuum truck instead, but that's the general gist of it. You take a big vacuum truck and you just every so often vacuum out any additional particulates that are there that shouldn't be there, or that are causing the structure not to perform at its best performance. As for grid pavers, I think we agreed pretty early on that permeable pavement was more suitable here since it was a larger area and wanted to have room for vehicles, and as well as, since it's an emergency parking area, we wanted to make sure it was plowable.
Alrighty, and our next question is, I heard you say that the drain on the beach would not be touched. Will you or the town try to fix the appearance of that area?
That's something we're definitely considering here in terms of the improvements we make. We do want it to look better. The outfall itself, we're not moving it, but we are going to, through bringing a lot of the stormwater essentially upstream just a little bit by getting it into that parking lot, it's going to reduce that erosion and scour, that very unsightly sort of silty mixture that you get in front of those outfalls.
And then this question was, do you have any specific plan for the area? Thank you for all your info and hard work with this project. We do not have any specific plans planned for this area on the beach. There will be landscaping done on the parking lot, but that will come more with final design. Thank you for attending this meeting and appreciating the work that's going into this. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, and I'll say, in terms of all planting in town, we prioritize, at least through the stormwater division, we prioritize firstly native species. Secondly, what's doable for the Public Works Department to maintain, because we want it to look nice and not get overgrown. And lastly, we do try to support pollinators when we can. We're just down the street from the wildflower meadow, so if we can do a pollinator supporting species, we'll do that as well.
And we have a comment from Lee. I appreciate the work you are all engaged in for this area. I've served as a selectman, town councilor, and past president of the East Braintree Civic Association. I am very pleased in your group for all the work you have presented this evening. I am also a resident in the area. I look forward to meeting you all on Saturday. Hopefully I can offer you some guidance moving forward.
Thank you for your comment.
Yeah, thanks, Lee. We look forward to seeing you on Saturday as well. Our next question is from Chrissy. Why is there no improvement to the beach?
Well, we do have that subsurface structure proposed on the beach. It's not actually it's not a functional addition to the beach in the sense that the beach's function is recreation. It's a functional addition to the beach in the sense that the beach's function is kind of serving as a flood buffer. Separately from that, improvement on the beach, other than drainage improvement, would be out of the scope of this project, but it's my understanding that there are other improvements planned for the beach. I'm not sure if any members of the Public Works Department want to speak up on that, but there are other things going into the beach that's just out of the scope of this particular project.
Hillary, I can speak to that briefly if you want.
Please, I didn't want to tell anybody the wrong thing, but I know you have
No, it's quite all right. No, we do have some, grounds team is planning on spending some time down there during the spring and early summer to make some, certainly some aesthetic improvements and to bring some much needed attention to the beach area. So we can, I can speak further to that on Saturday, but we can certainly look forward to that once the weather warms up quite a bit.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Chrissy, for your question. Our next question is from Will. Sorry, I missed them. Had to step away for a bit. Like the plan for porous asphalt storage basins is a porous asphalt mix, even if we don't go for extra stone and storage beneath, like that section. For repaved town parking lots, something Braintree would consider as a standard. I think I've read there are stormwater benefits to using the mix in standard paving sections, even without the extra feet of stone storage.
Thank you for that. I am probably not read on this specific area of this topic. What I will say is that could be a potential standard for Braintree and parking lots. porous and permeable pavement doesn't always work super well in like a road scenario. So focusing on parking lots is a good consideration. But that's more of a policy thing. So that would be something that happens through policymakers rather than through a given town department. That said, I really like the idea, and I think something that we need to think about going forward as we do come back and pave things is whether these solutions can be cost effective and well maintained as well. I'll give an example. Provincetown has paved all of Commercial Street. If you've ever been to Provincetown, that's the main road in Provincetown. And it doesn't get a lot of vehicular traffic because it's closed to vehicles in the summer. So seasonally, people are just walking down that street, and it's a big, gorgeous, permeable street. And it's probably the most ambitious permeable pavement project we've ever seen in Massachusetts, and it's still under 5 years old. So we're seeing if stuff like that really works in the long term still. So I think with a little bit more time, a little bit more information, this is definitely something we can continue to think about.
Awesome. Are there any other questions that anybody has? No? Alrighty, I'm going to go ahead and close out of the chat then. Thank you again, everybody, for all of your questions. In the next couple slides, I will be showing you the best way to get a hold of us if you do have any follow-up questions, comments, concerns, etc. And then you can also let us know on Saturday during the site visit. With that being said, how can you help? I think the biggest thing that people see when they see these projects and these grants is that this is taking a long time. How do we do something now? Well, there's a variety of things that you can do. A lot of that is what I do with the outreach program for the stormwater department. Biggest thing you can do is report. If you see something wrong with your catch basins, if you see excess flooding out of them, anything is clogged, if you see outfalls that have damage to them, anything like that, please go to See Quick Fix and report them. That way we can go out and make fixes before things get too broken or too out of hand, and then it costs more money to fix them. We have guys that go out every day to do those cleanings and those repairs. So we definitely appreciate as much community feedback on that as well. Another thing that we can do, and I remember briefly someone asking about Sunset Lake, and I want to point out that there are storm drains at Sunset Lake, and you will have probably noticed in your neighborhoods as well that there are storm drains in front of many of your homes. We are doing an Adopt a Storm Drain program. Essentially what it is you can adopt 1, 2, 3, however many drains that you want to in your neighborhood. You are only required to do 4 cleanings a year, so every quarter, but you are always welcome to do more. You go online, pick your drain and adopt it. You can name it, you can make it something fun with your family, you can name it after your sports teams. I think my favorite one that I've seen is Reynaldo. And what you do is when you clean it off, you track what you've cleaned. So whether that be leaves, dirt, sediment, right now, this is a great time to adopt one and see how much of an impact you're making, because snow and ice and salt also count in the tracking and the debris collection. You put that all online, you say how long you spent cleaning and how much you cleaned, and then it runs a report and it shows you how many pounds you've collected, and then also how it's impacted your neighborhood, the watershed you live in, and the town of Braintree itself. It's been a super fun program. We've been doing it for almost a year now, and we have collected over 190 pounds of debris. I can't even say that we've done it. It's been all of you, and it's been all of our community members. It's been awesome to have, and we are excited to see it growing. So, and you also don't have to just collect outside of your home. If you want to do something like go to Sunset Lake because you notice that there's a lot of garbage out there in the summertime, feel free to adopt one of those drains. You can adopt wherever you'd like and however many you'd like. And we're hoping to really expand the program. And as its 1-year anniversary is coming up, we have some exciting things coming up for it. So definitely go on and adopt. It's ma.adopt-a storm-a-drain.org. And a fun little brag is that we are the only town in the state of Massachusetts to be doing this program. So it's kind of fun to be the front runners of this and to be kind of the test subjects to see how it goes. I would also like to mention again, follow us on social media. We do a lot of social media posts and stuff online that shows simple ways that you can reduce stormwater pollution in the area, whether it's just little things at home, like making sure that you're taking dog bags with you on walks. In the summertime, we do fertilizer advisements, that kind of stuff. Give us a follow on any or all of our platforms. And then if you look at this QR code on the right-hand side, we also have a monthly newsletter that we send out called the Stormwater Splash. Basically, it gives you information about what we're doing in the department, what's happening in Braintree, other things happening in the DPW as well, and then facts and educational pieces on what you can do to make sure stormwater in your immediate area is pollution-free or as pollution-free as it can get. If you do have any questions about any of that, any of the information that you've seen tonight, or any additional comments, please go ahead and give us a call here, or you can send me an email directly at wwalton@braintreema.gov, and we will happily work with you guys on any questions or concerns that you have.
Thank you so much, Wednesday. And thank you again, everyone. We want to be respectful of everybody's time. So this is where we end for the night. But again, this is not your last opportunity for feedback. We're here all the time, but particularly for this project before we go to permitting, we're here for about a month. So if you think of something, don't hesitate to grab your phone, give us a call or send us an email. And if you have any questions for us, this is how to reach us. I'll leave it open for a few minutes so that you can see it, take a picture of it, do what you need to do, write it down. And we, if we're going to see you Saturday, we're excited to see you there. And if not, there's plenty of other opportunities to see us. We'll be out and about. So thank you again. Have a great rest of your evening. And thank you again to Jess and Jen and Chris and the rest of the Department of Public Works who are here with us as well. Good night, everybody. We'll leave it open for a couple more minutes, but I think we're all shutting off video at this point. Have a good evening.
Good night.